What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to offer a quick review of the Season 1 finale of The White Lotus on HBO. The White Lotus was created by Mike White, who wrote and directed all 6 episodes, giving us a consistently entertaining, self-contained series which follows the lives of both the staff and the guests staying at an exotic resort in Hawaii. I was late to the party, but thanks to a dear friend of mine, I decided to check it out and quickly got up to speed. And if you're already a fan of The White Lotus, the good news is that HBO has renewed the show for a Season 2 with a brand new cast of characters at another resort. But as far as this season is concerned, I really enjoyed it. I laughed like hell throughout much of the season, and I loved how Mike White was willing to show us some truly deranged, borderline disturbing scenes because I need a little darkness in my comedy, and as a writer, Mike White seems to take delight in presenting one scene after another that's designed to make the audience squirm or writhe in embarrassment, all while they're unable to take their eyes off the ludicrously strange behavior exhibited by this amazing cast of characters. Of course, not every character is equally compelling or every storyline equally interesting, but at a bare minimum, the tale of the manager of the resort, Armand, played by Murray Bartlett, makes this show worth a look. I've seen a lot of folks comparing his performance to John Cleese's performance in Fawlty Towers, but I'm not sure that's the best way to pitch the show. Fawlty Towers is a sitcom and totally different in style and tone, and I think this comparison set up the wrong expectations for The White Lotus. But where the two shows do have some overlap is watching Murray Bartlett coming increasingly unglued as he deals with some of the most high-maintenance guests imaginable, slowly but surely and then gloriously falling off the wagon into some of the most entertaining drug-fueled rampages I've seen in recent memory. Film critic Mark Kermode's always talking about whether or not a comedy passes the 6 laugh test, where you involuntarily find yourself laughing out loud. And for me, Murray Bartlett's amazing performance got me past that threshold pretty much every single episode. But it's going to be tough to go any further without giving anything away, so if you're thinking about watching the show, my advice is simply to check out the trailer, give the show a chance. It's definitely been a highlight of 2021 for me, and I think its fan base will only continue to grow between now and the second season. So let's talk about this episode. Reviewing a social satire can be really tricky for me because whether or not something makes you laugh or giggle with devilish delight, it can be so subjective and it varies so wildly from individual to individual. But also trying to analyze or explain why a satire or a joke is working can very easily take all the fun out of it. But I'm going to roll the dice and discuss these beats all the same. The big question going into this episode was who would be going home in a body bag. It was teased in the very first episode. I suspected Tanya's new boyfriend Greg, given his health issues, which he admits could make him drop dead any second, but he managed to make it to the end. Also, shout out to Jennifer Coolidge as Tanya, who is one of the real treats of the season as the crazy, insecure, needy alcoholic who goes on quite an emotional journey, exposing the center of the onion as she described it, and eventually discovering some modicum of peace by the end of the story, even if her peace comes at the expense of the dreams and emotions of Belinda, played to perfection by Natasha Rothwell. Guests treating the staff like shit was definitely a recurring theme of the season. But Quinn, Paula, Mark, Rachel, all these characters were contenders for who would bite the dust. But in the end, it was the lovable Armand who gets a knife in the chest after his attempt at revenge completely and totally backfires. In hindsight being 2020, it really couldn't be anyone else. And obviously he could only die at the hands of his mortal nemesis, Shane Patton, played by Jake Lacey. And honestly, the feud between these two characters is what made the show for me, giving us the two most shocking and hysterical scenes all season. The first being the end of episode 4 when Shane catches Armand drugged out of his mind, indulging in what might be the most enthusiastic ass-eating sequence in television history. But then in this episode, watching Armand squat down and rip ass over Shane's luggage, it was just absolutely priceless, especially after watching him raise so much hell with the fellows back in the office. And over the last 20 years or so, we've seen all kinds of crazy things on HBO with shows like The Sopranos and Deadwood, Rome, or Game of Thrones. I mean, HBO's been willing to explore some pretty strange terrain, but this was actually one of the few times where I actually looked away from the screen for a few seconds, even if I was giggling like a 5-year-old the whole time. And now that I think of it, just these 2 scenes are probably why I'm doing this review. Because for me, most movies and shows these days, they're so tedious and they're so risk-averse, but if a storyteller can come along and shock the hell out of me with some truly outrageous content, I will give credit where credit is due, and I will always be on the side of provocateurs. But some other highlights for me from this episode include watching Quinn living the dream and becoming a local, joining his new friends on their ongoing series of canoeing adventures. Those sequences, along with the scuba diving sequences with his dad, were absolutely beautiful to watch. The underwater footage and all the turtles and everything, it was just stunning. And of course, enhancing all this beautiful photography is the amazing music we heard throughout the season. I particularly enjoyed the use of Bach's Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, which was featured several times during the finale. And I can honestly say, I'm going to miss the theme song from the opening title sequence. But if I were to offer some critiques, and they aren't major at all, or a deal breaker in any way, but there were two storylines that for me ended in less satisfying fashion. I'm a big fan of Alexandra Daddario. I've been following her career since True Detective, but I wasn't really that into the resolution of her storyline, basically settling for a dude who I think she never would have married in the first place. Also, Olivia and Paula, they needed a much bigger finish to their story apart from simply cuddling, not to mention the fact that Kai's life has been completely ruined. But after seeing her in this and Euphoria and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sydney Sweeney's career as an actress, it's obviously just exploding right now. I think she did a great job, but I feel like her best scenes were earlier in the season, like when Olivia and Paula decided to get completely trashed on the beach, only to have Tanya stumble upon them, killing their buzz by talking their ears off about her dead mother. That scene just absolutely had me screaming with laughter. So as I start to wrap up this video, I'll simply say this show was a very enjoyable ride. What really caught me off guard consistently throughout the season was how a lot of the scripts were able to tap into and explore some really controversial issues on class, gender, race, etc., all without falling into the trap of these really predictable narratives and conclusions that so many lesser writers use as a crutch. And if some of these conversations throughout the season left people scratching their heads, not knowing what to make of those conversations, I view that as a positive. Those topics are incredibly complex and incredibly messy, and they give the show a little bit of depth that would not be there otherwise. But at this point, writer Mike White, he has a ton of experience under his belt, going all the way back to Freaks and Geeks back in 2000, and if he's back in the director's chair next season, I will absolutely be back for second helpings. But I think that's all I have for now. Hope you enjoyed my little rant on the season finale. In terms of what's coming up on HBO, obviously I'm really looking forward to season 3 of Succession. I might be taking a look at Scenes from a Marriage. However, I've got a lot of love and affection for Ingmar Bergman's original show from the 1970s. But at a bare minimum, I will give the show a try and try to keep an open mind. But let me know below what you thought of the season finale of The White Lotus. And if you want to talk more, you can always hunt me down on Twitter at Geekin' Out. Also, if you enjoyed this video, give the channel a subscribe, the video a like, all that good stuff. And if you're looking for more content, check out my podcast, Wrong Reel. But I hope everyone has a great week ahead of them. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.